Tyler Bennet first saw the silver car on Tuesday morning, August 9th, 2015. It was parked across from his office building in downtown Chicago. Nothing weird about that, except he'd seen the same car outside his gym the night before, and again at his coffee shop that morning. Tyler had worked in marketing for 15 years. He knew how to spot patterns. By Wednesday, he was sure someone was watching him. The 44-year-old marketing director couldn't stop checking his mirrors. He changed his route home. He parked in different spots at work. At dinner, his wife Sophia noticed something was wrong. She watched him keep glancing toward the windows of their expensive house in Willowbrook Heights. "Everything okay at work?" Sophia asked. She poured more wine into his glass with the smooth moves that made her clothing store so popular with rich customers. Tyler wasn't sure how to explain feeling like prey without sounding crazy. "Just work stress. The Denver project. Nothing I can't handle." Sophia looked at him with real concern. "I'm worried about you. We're a team, you know. You can tell me anything." Tyler felt better hearing his wife's support. They'd been married 8 years. Her boutique business had grown right alongside his corporate success. They looked like the perfect wealthy suburban couple. Thursday morning brought bigger problems. Tyler found a GPS tracking device on his BMW. It was stuck behind the rear wheel, attached like a pro had done it. His hand shook as he took photos with his phone. The little black box looked harmless, but it made Tyler's stomach drop. That evening, Tyler called his best friend Blake Ramirez. Blake was the only person he trusted completely. "Someone's tracking me," Tyler told him. "Professional surveillance, GPS devices, the whole thing. I need help figuring out who and why." Blake's response was everything Tyler hoped for. Immediate concern mixed with problem solving. "Meet me at Murphy's Bar in 20 minutes. Don't go home first. Don't take your usual route. We need to figure this out before whoever's watching makes their move." Murphy's was a dark bar that attracted older customers who wanted quiet conversation, not trendy drinks. Tyler showed Blake his evidence. Photos of the tracking device, notes about the silver car, a growing sense that his life was spinning out of control. Blake studied the images with the same focus Tyler remembered from college. Back then, his friend's sharp mind had helped them both get through tough business classes. Blake was a few years younger and had built a successful real estate company through the same careful approach he now used on Tyler's problem. "This is serious," Blake said. "Professional surveillance isn't cheap or casual. Someone has big money and a strong reason to track you." Tyler couldn't think of anyone who'd want to watch him. He was a marketing executive, not a spy or politician. He didn't have enemies. Blake suggested work competitors. The Denver expansion could be worth millions to your company. Maybe someone's trying to steal information or sabotage the project. That made sense. Tyler's company had been fighting hard for market share in the Rocky Mountain area. Corporate spying wasn't unheard of in their business. Blake also asked about personal problems. "You and Sophia having any issues? Money trouble? Relationship problems? Anything that might make you a target?" Tyler shook his head right away. "Sophia and I are solid. Her boutiques are doing great. We're talking about starting a family. If anything, life's been better than ever." Blake nodded, but something flickered in his expression, too quick for Tyler to read. "Let's focus on the work angle, but you need to be careful. Whatever this is about, these people are serious." They agreed Tyler would change his routines, install security cameras at home, and document any more surveillance. Blake offered to do his own investigation, using contacts in law enforcement and private security. "I've got your back," Blake promised. "Whoever's doing this picked the wrong target." Friday was Tyler's last full day alive. It started with a discovery that scared him deeply. Tyler always got up early for work, usually while Sophia was still sleeping. He went to his home office to grab some files, and immediately knew something was wrong. His desk looked almost normal, but not quite. Papers were in slightly different positions. File folders had been moved. Someone had even tried to access his computer. The screensaver was different from what he remembered, and there were failed login attempts in the security log. Tyler's blood ran cold. Sophia had been in bed with him all night. He was sure of that, which meant someone else had been in their house while they slept. He wanted to wake Sophia and tell her, but the thought of frightening her made him hesitate. She'd be terrified knowing someone had crept through their home in the dark. And what could he really prove? There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing stolen. Just the unsettling certainty that someone had gone through his private files. Tyler sat in his office chair, staring at the papers someone had examined. Financial documents, insurance policies, work contracts. Nothing that seemed valuable to an outsider, but the violation felt personal, like someone had been studying his life from the inside out. He decided not to call the police. What would he tell them? That his papers looked slightly moved? They'd think he was paranoid. Instead, he made a mental note to call a security company once he got to his office that morning. He'd have them install cameras throughout the house as soon as possible. At least then he'd know if anyone tried this again. Tyler spent Friday evening feeling the mysterious threats closing around him. The hunter had become the hunted, but he still didn't know who was hunting him. Saturday, August 13th, started like any other weekend morning. Tyler woke early, as was his habit, while Sophia slept peacefully beside him. He moved quietly through their morning routine, brushing his teeth, pulling on his running gear, stretching in the hallway. In the kitchen, he made coffee and toast, but found he had no appetite. His stomach was tight with the stress of the past week. The surveillance, the break-in at his office files, the growing sense that his life was spinning out of control. It all weighed on him. Maybe a long run would help clear his head. Exercise had always been his way of working through problems. Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her silk pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "You're up early," she said, moving to pour herself some coffee, even for a Saturday.
Couldn't sleep, Tyler admitted. Thought I'd get a good run in. Try to clear my head about all this surveillance stuff.
Sophia moved closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. She suggested he take a break from running alone, with everything that had been happening. Tyler assured her he'd be fine. He leaned down to kiss her forehead and promised to stick to the main trails in Forest Glen Park, where lots of people would be around. She smiled, but he could see the worry in her eyes. She asked him to be careful and to be back by 8 so she could make them a proper breakfast. "I love you," Tyler said, meaning it completely. "Love you too," Sophia replied, watching from the doorway as he headed for the garage. Tyler jogged down their driveway into the cool morning air, breathing deeply and trying to shake off the paranoia that had consumed his week. He had no idea that would be the last time he saw his home. Sophia called 911 at 4:30 p.m. Her voice shook with fear and exhaustion. She sounded like a woman pushed to her breaking point by 12 hours of growing dread. "My husband didn't come home from his morning run," she told the dispatcher. "This isn't like Tyler at all. He's the most reliable person I know." Officer Lisa Graham arrived to find Sophia in the kind of controlled distress that experienced cops recognized as real. The woman had clearly been crying. Her makeup was smudged in realistic patterns. Her usually perfect appearance was messy in ways that suggested genuine pain. Sophia's living room showed signs of a worried wife's day. Tyler's running shoes sat by the door where she'd placed them while searching for clues. His breakfast plate remained on the kitchen counter untouched, eggs and toast that showed a man who'd planned to return. Officer Graham settled into the family's expensive leather couch, while Sophia sat nervously on the edge of an armchair. "Tell me about this morning." Sophia's story came out with convincing detail. Tyler had been distracted lately, worried about work pressure and some mysterious surveillance he thought he was under. Reported a break-in, grown more and more paranoid about being followed. Sophia explained that she thought Tyler was just stressed about the Denver project, but yesterday he'd shown her photos of a GPS device someone had put on his BMW. He was scared. Really scared. Officer Graham made careful notes. These details painted Tyler not as a missing person, but as a possible victim of targeted harassment. She asked if he had any idea who might be watching him. Sophia said Tyler thought it might be business competitors, someone trying to steal information about his company's expansion plans. Tyler was handling a project worth millions of dollars, the kind of thing that could make people desperate. The explanation was logical and believable. Sophia clearly understood Tyler's recent concerns and fears. "This morning Tyler almost looked relieved," Sophia continued. "He said he was going to clear his head with a long run, maybe figure out his next step. He kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, said he'd be back by 8 for breakfast." The detail about their final goodbye was particularly devastating. It came out with the kind of raw emotion that convinced Officer Graham she was witnessing real grief. Sophia's knowledge of Tyler's routines and concerns made her story compelling and detailed. Sophia explained that at first she waited, but after hours with no word, she went looking. She showed photos on her phone of empty jogging paths and concerned text messages she'd sent to Tyler's unresponsive number. She said she must have asked 20 people if they'd seen him, but nobody remembered a man matching his description. The photos documented Sophia's search efforts in the area where Tyler had disappeared. The text messages showed her growing concern as hours passed without response. Officer Graham asked if Tyler was having any personal problems, financial stress, relationship issues, anything that might make him want to disappear. Sophia's response was immediate and heartfelt. Absolutely not. They'd been talking about starting a family, planning a vacation to Europe next spring. Tyler was happy, settled, looking forward to the future. She paused, considering something painful. The only stress in his life was this surveillance thing. He was convinced someone was watching him, studying his routines. He even asked Blake to help him figure out who might be behind it. The mention of Blake was natural to Sophia's account. Tyler's best friend would be someone he might reach out to if he was in trouble, and explaining their connection made sense for the investigation. Sophia suddenly said she should call Blake. Tyler might have reached out to him, especially if he was in some kind of trouble. Officer Graham watched Sophia dial Blake's number. She noted the woman's clear relief when Tyler's best friend answered immediately. Sophia told Blake that Tyler never came home from his run that morning and asked if he'd heard from him.
Blake's voice carried shock and immediate concern. He said no. He hadn't talked to Tyler since Thursday night at Murphy's. Tyler was worried about that surveillance thing, but Blake never thought something like this could happen. He asked what he could do and if Sophia needed him to come over.
The conversation continued for several minutes. Blake offered to organize search parties, contact Tyler's colleagues, do whatever was necessary to find his missing friend. To Officer Graham, the exchange sounded like genuine concern between people who cared deeply about Tyler's welfare.
After ending the call, Sophia turned to Officer Graham with renewed determination. Blake was right. They needed to organize a proper search. Tyler could be hurt somewhere, unable to call for help. The shift from grief-stricken wife to active organizer was exactly what experienced investigators expected from someone processing trauma. Sophia's determination moved Officer Graham to offer department resources and suggest search strategies. As the interview ended, Sophia walked Officer Graham to the door. She kept her composure until the police car disappeared down the street. Then she sat down heavily, looking exhausted by the ordeal of recounting her husband's disappearance.
An Officer Graham filed her report about Tyler Bennett's disappearance. The surveillance elements and tracking device caught the attention of her supervisor. Missing persons cases involving potential stalking or corporate espionage required detective-level investigation. The case was transferred to Detective Rachel Foster. Foster had 15 years of experience with the Chicago Police Department, specializing in complex missing persons and fraud cases. She'd seen enough wealthy suburban couples with secrets to know that perfect marriages often hid the darkest betrayals. She planned to re-interview Sophia Bennet soon, but first wanted to meet Tyler's best friend. Blake Ramirez stood in the parking garage of his downtown loft, carefully polishing the chrome details of his new Maserati. Detective Rachel Foster and her partner Walsh came out of the elevator. To any casual observer, Blake looked exactly like what he claimed to be. A successful real estate investor, enjoying the rewards of his hard work. The car was magnificent. Its deep burgundy paint gleamed under the fluorescent lights, like liquid metal. Blake had chosen the color carefully. The flashy red he originally wanted might draw unwanted attention. This subtle luxury suggested success without showing off, exactly the image he needed to project. Detective Foster showed her badge as they approached. They were investigating the disappearance of Tyler Bennet and understood Blake was a close friend. Blake's reaction was immediate and concerned. He set down his polishing cloth and nodded grimly. Yes, Sophia had called him yesterday about Tyler not coming home from his run. He'd been worried sick ever since. Had they found anything? Any leads? Blake's questions came quickly, showing someone who'd been anxiously waiting for news. Detective Foster had interviewed hundreds of people connected to missing person cases. Blake's response felt like that of someone who'd already been dealing with the shock and was now desperate for answers. Blake ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of distress that looked completely natural. This didn't make sense. Tyler had been paranoid lately, convinced someone was watching him, but Blake never thought something like this could actually happen. Detective Foster's attention sharpened. She asked what he meant by paranoid. Blake explained that Tyler had called him Thursday night. He said he'd found a GPS tracker on his car, thought he was being followed by professionals. Blake met him at Murphy's bar, helped him think through who might be behind it. Blake pulled out his phone, showing the detectives photos Tyler had shared during their meeting. The images showed a sophisticated tracking device, the kind of equipment that suggested serious surveillance rather than casual stalking. Tyler thought it might be corporate espionage. He was handling a big expansion project for his company, something worth millions. We figured maybe competitors were trying to steal information. The explanation was logical, professional, and completely consistent with Sophia's account. Detective Foster found herself dealing with more than just a missing person. Something big was going on. Walsh glanced at the fancy car and asked if it was a recent purchase. Blake's pride was obvious as he described the vehicle's features and performance capabilities. He'd been saving for something like this for years, finally closed a major deal last month and decided to treat himself. That must have been quite a deal, Foster noted. These cars aren't cheap. Real estate had been good to him, Blake replied. He specialized in commercial properties and industrial developments. When the market was right, the commissions could be substantial.
The explanation was reasonable, supported by Blake's obvious expertise as he discussed market conditions and recent transactions. To Detective Foster, he seemed exactly what he claimed, a successful businessman who'd earned his luxury through hard work and good timing.
"I'm worried about Sophia," Blake said suddenly. She sounded devastated when she called. Tyler was her whole world. They were crazy about each other. Blake described the Bennet marriage in glowing terms, emphasizing Tyler's devotion to his wife and their plans for the future. He painted a picture of a couple so committed to each other that external threats were the only possible explanation for Tyler's disappearance. Foster asked if Blake had noticed anything unusual about Tyler lately. Changes in behavior, new concerns, anything that might explain why someone would target him. Blake's response was thoughtful and measured, the kind of careful analysis the detectives expected from someone who knew the victim well. Tyler had been stressed about work, but that was normal for him. He was ambitious, driven, the kind of guy who took on more responsibility than he probably should.
But the surveillance thing was new, Blake added. That really spooked Tyler. He wasn't paranoid by nature, so when he started noticing patterns, taking photos, documenting everything, Blake knew something serious was happening. The conversation continued for nearly an hour.
Blake provided detailed insights into Tyler's personality, routines, and recent concerns. As the interview ended, Blake offered his complete cooperation with the investigation. Whatever they needed, phone records, financial information, polygraph test, anything that might help find Tyler. He provided his contact information, promised to call immediately if Tyler reached out, and offered to organize civilian search parties if needed. Driving away from Blake's building, Detective Foster made notes about the interview. Blake had been cooperative, and his story matched Sophia's account.
For now, he wasn't a suspect, just a concerned friend trying to help. But Foster knew that in missing person cases, everyone close to the victim needed to be checked out thoroughly. They'd verify Blake's timeline and financial records as part of standard procedure.
The investigation was just beginning. Detective Rachel Foster spread Officer Graham's report across her desk while her partner Walsh grabbed coffee. 3 days had passed since Tyler Bennett's disappearance, and Foster wanted to review every detail before moving forward. Missing person cases involving surveillance equipment usually aren't random, Foster said, studying the photos of the GPS tracker Tyler had found. Someone with resources was watching him. Walsh nodded, saying the corporate espionage angle made sense. The guy was handling a multi-million-dollar expansion. Foster read through Sophia's statement again. The grieving wife had been cooperative, but something felt off about the case. Maybe it was her 15 years of experience, or maybe it was the way perfect suburban couples always seem to have the messiest secrets. I want to re-interview the wife, Foster decided. Officer Graham did a good initial report, but I need to hear Sophia's story myself. An hour later, Foster and Walsh stood on the doorstep of the Bennet house in Willowbrook Heights. Sophia answered, wearing designer clothes and perfectly applied makeup, quite different from the devastated wife Officer Graham had described. "Mrs. Bennet, I'm Detective Foster. We're taking over Tyler's case from Officer Graham. I hope you don't mind if we ask you a few more questions." Sophia invited them in, leading them to the same expensive living room where she'd spoken to Officer Graham. But this time, Foster noticed details her colleague might have missed. On the kitchen counter, partially hidden under a magazine, was an opened envelope from Midwest Collections Agency. Foster caught a glimpse of bold red text reading "Final notice and immediate payment required." Foster asked casually how Sophia's boutique business was doing. "Wonderful, really wonderful. We're expanding to a second location next month. Tyler was so proud of my success," Sophia replied, her smile bright and immediate. The response felt rehearsed. Foster had heard enough lies to recognize when someone was trying too hard to convince her. Foster said that was great to hear, and it must be nice to have 2 successful careers in the family. "Oh yes, we've been very blessed financially. No money troubles at all. Tyler always said we were living the American dream." Foster made notes while Sophia repeated much of what she'd told Officer Graham. Tyler's paranoia about surveillance, his fear about being followed, their loving marriage with plans for the future. But small inconsistencies emerged. Sophia mentioned Tyler being stressed about work for months, while she'd told Officer Graham it was recent. She described their last conversation as brief, but had previously given Officer Graham detailed dialogue about their final goodbye. Most telling was her continued emphasis on their perfect financial situation, even though Foster hadn't asked about money again. Foster had to ask if there was any reason someone might want to hurt Tyler for financial gain. Large insurance policies, business debts, anything like that. "Nothing like that," Sophia said quickly. "We have normal life insurance, but nothing unusual."
Tyler was very conservative about money. After 30 minutes, Foster thanked Sophia and they left. In the car, Walsh asked what she thought. "She's lying about something," Foster said. "Did you see that collections notice on her counter? And she keeps talking about how great their finances are when nobody asked." Walsh had noticed it too. He wondered if the boutique business wasn't as successful as she claimed. "I think we need to look at Tyler's financial records. If his wife is having money problems she's hiding from him, that changes everything about this case."
Judge Patricia Williams looked up from her afternoon paperwork as Detective Foster knocked on her chamber's door. Foster had called ahead, explaining she needed a search warrant for financial records in a missing person case. Foster sat across from the judge's desk and opened her case file.
She explained that Tyler Bennet had been missing for 3 days under suspicious circumstances. Someone had been conducting professional surveillance on him before his disappearance. Judge Williams examined the photos of the GPS tracking device Tyler had discovered on his car.
"This suggests the disappearance wasn't random," she observed. Foster agreed completely. She explained that Tyler had reported someone going through his personal files at home. He'd grown increasingly paranoid about being watched.
This level of surveillance suggested either corporate espionage or personal motives. The detective continued, saying that during her re-interview of Tyler's wife, she'd noticed several red flags.
Sophia claimed her business was thriving and emphasized their perfect financial situation, repeatedly, even when not asked about money. Foster showed the judge a photo she'd discreetly taken of the collections notice on Sophia's counter.
The final notice from Midwest Collections Agency directly contradicted Sophia's claims of financial success. Judge Williams studied the evidence. "What do you hope to find in the financial records?" "Financial stress is one of the biggest motivators in missing person cases," Foster explained. "If Sophia's lying about money troubles, it could indicate motive for foul play."
The records will show if there are hidden debts, insurance policies, or other financial pressures that might explain Tyler's disappearance. She added that Tyler's work on a multi-million-dollar expansion project also made corporate espionage possible. The financial records would help determine if business competitors had reason to target him. Judge Williams reviewed the warrant application carefully. The surveillance evidence, combined with Sophia's suspicious behavior and obvious deception about finances, provided sufficient probable cause. She signed the warrant, authorizing access to Tyler Bennett's bank accounts, insurance policies, and investment records for the past 12 months. Foster thanked the judge and headed directly to the state crime lab, warrant in hand. Dr. Victoria Morrison, the department's best forensic accountant, was waiting. Morrison had already begun pulling Tyler's financial records when Foster arrived. Within 2 hours, she had preliminary findings that made Foster's suspicions look understated. Morrison told Foster she'd been right to be suspicious about the wife's financial claims. Sophia Bennett's boutiques hadn't been expanding. They'd been hemorrhaging money for 18 months. Foster studied the bank statements Morrison displayed. Sophia's business accounts showed consistent losses month after month. She'd covered the shortfalls by systematically draining Tyler and her joint accounts, transferring funds to keep her failing stores afloat. Morrison explained that Sophia had lost nearly $500,000, and Tyler apparently had no idea. The transactions showed she'd been moving money when he was at work, timing transfers to avoid his notice. But Morrison's most shocking discovery was still to come. She pulled up an insurance policy that made Foster's blood run cold. 3 weeks before Tyler disappeared, Sophia had applied for additional life insurance coverage on her husband, $2 million with herself as primary beneficiary. Foster examined the policy documents. That was suspicious timing, but not necessarily criminal. Morrison pointed out the interesting part. There was a secondary beneficiary listed, Blake Ramirez, for $500,000 upon Tyler's death. Foster asked why Tyler would give his best friend $500,000. Morrison pointed to the signature analysis she'd conducted. He didn't. Sophia had forged his signature so convincingly that the insurance company processed it as legitimate. But when Morrison compared it to Tyler's known signatures, the forgery became obvious. The insurance company had no idea they'd been deceived. The revelation hit Foster like a physical blow. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. Sophia and Blake were partners in an insurance fraud scheme that required Tyler's death to succeed. Foster told Morrison she needed warrants for both their phone records. If they were working together on insurance fraud, she needed to know how deep this conspiracy went. Morrison nodded, saying she'd keep digging into the financial records. If there was more, she'd find it. Foster headed back to Judge Williams' chambers. Insurance fraud involving a missing person provided more than enough probable cause for phone records. The digital trail would either confirm the conspiracy or reveal that Sophia and Blake were innocent victims of circumstance. But Foster's 15 years of experience told her she was about to uncover something much darker than insurance fraud. Tyler Bennet wasn't just missing, he was dead. And the two people who claimed to love him most had killed him for money.
Detective Rachel Foster returned to Judge Williams' chambers with evidence that changed Tyler Bennett's disappearance from a missing person case into a murder investigation. The insurance fraud Morrison had found gave her clear reason for phone records. Judge Williams looked at the forged signature evidence and approved warrants for both Sophia's and Blake's phone records. Foster had 48 hours to use them. Back at the state crime lab, Dr. Morrison had kept digging through the financial records while Foster was getting the warrants.
What she'd found painted an even darker picture. Morrison explained that Blake's real estate company had filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago. He owed over $800,000 in loans he couldn't pay. Without the insurance money, he was completely broke.
Foster studied Blake's financial records. The successful businessman who'd polished his expensive car was actually broke. His confident manner had hidden desperate circumstances that gave him a strong reason for murder. But Morrison's most damaging discovery was still to come. She showed Foster a series of money transfers between Sophia and Blake's accounts that went back 2 months. They'd been moving money back and forth, creating a pattern that showed they were working together closely. The financial records showed transfers, loans, and payments that painted Blake and Sophia as close financial partners rather than casual friends. Even more damning were the times of their transactions, which often happened during the same hours.
Morrison concluded that they'd started working together in June. The plan had gotten worse by July. Whatever relationship they claimed to have, it was much deeper than either had told police.
Foster requested the complete cell phone analysis, understanding that GPS tracking data would either confirm or destroy the financial evidence. Modern smartphones created electronic fingerprints more detailed than any traditional surveillance.
They tracked their users' movements so precisely that alibis were nearly impossible to fake. The results arrived within hours, and they were explosive. Morrison pulled up the GPS data on her computer screen.
Sophia's phone had not been at her house during the crucial hours of Tyler's disappearance, despite her claims of waiting anxiously for his return. Instead, GPS data placed her near Blackwater Quarry at 8:15 a.m., exactly when she should have been making breakfast and expecting Tyler back from his jog. Even more damning, Blake's phone had pinged the same towers at the same time.
They killed him together, Foster told Walsh as they looked at the evidence. Sophia's entire story about waiting at home was a lie. She was at the body disposal site with Blake while Tyler was already dead. The cell phone data showed more layers of lies.
Sophia and Blake had been in frequent contact for months, despite claiming they barely knew each other beyond their connection to Tyler. Hotel records showed them checking into the Riverside Inn together multiple times, using fake names and paying cash to avoid leaving obvious trails. Most damaging of all was the timing of their communications. Sophia and Blake had exchanged dozens of text messages during the very hours when she claimed to be frantically searching for her missing husband. They were coordinating their stories and alibis while pretending to be concerned for Tyler's welfare. Foster displayed the message logs on her computer. Sophia had texted Blake at 4:15 p.m. on Saturday, 15 minutes before she called 911 to report Tyler missing. The message read, "Everything ready. Make the call in 20 minutes." The message proved everything. Sophia had been faking her grief and panic. The digital evidence was devastating, creating a timeline that exposed every element of Sophia and Blake's lies. They'd acted like they cared about Tyler, but their phones told the real story. Foster wanted more than just circumstantial evidence. She needed proof that Tyler was actually dead and that Sophia and Blake were responsible for his murder. The search of Blackwater Quarry would begin the following morning, guided by the exact coordinates where both suspects' phones had sent their final signals on the morning Tyler disappeared forever. Foster had solved murders before, but never one where the killers had documented their own crimes so thoroughly through their digital devices. Sophia and Blake had thought they were committing the perfect murder, forgetting that they carried the instruments of their own conviction in their pockets. The evidence was overwhelming. Tomorrow, they would search Blackwater Quarry for Tyler's body, and then arrest warrants would be issued for the two people who had betrayed him most. The arrest of Sophia Bennet and Blake Ramirez happened at the same time at 6 a.m. on September 3rd. The raids were coordinated to prevent the co-conspirators from communicating or destroying evidence. Detective Foster led the team that arrived at Sophia's Willowbrook Heights home, while Walsh handled Blake's downtown loft. Sophia answered her door wearing a silk robe, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She looked like she'd been expecting this moment for weeks. Her composure was remarkable, a woman who'd spent months preparing for every possibility, except the digital trail that had ultimately exposed her lies. Detective Foster announced that Sophia was under arrest for the murder of Tyler Bennet.
conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. She produced handcuffs that felt almost anticlimactic after the complex investigation that had led to this moment. Sophia replied that this was insane, but her protest lacked the passionate conviction Foster expected from an innocent person. She said her husband had been missing for 3 weeks. Instead of finding him, they were arresting his wife. "We found him," Foster said quietly. "And we found you." The lie was calculated, designed to provoke a reaction that might lead to confession or additional evidence. Sophia's face changed for a second. Then she smiled like nothing had happened.
Meanwhile, Blake's arrest at his loft provided the dramatic confrontation Foster had been anticipating. Walsh found him in the parking garage, once again polishing his Maserati, as if the ritual of caring for the luxury vehicle could somehow protect him from the consequences of his actions. Walsh announced that Blake Ramirez was under arrest for murder. Blake's reaction was immediate and devastating. Rather than protest his innocence or demand explanations, he simply set down his polishing cloth and nodded, as if he'd been expecting this moment for weeks. He said he wanted a lawyer, but he needed them to know something first. Walsh activated his digital recorder, understanding that suspects often revealed crucial information during their vulnerable moments immediately following arrest. Blake continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tyler didn't suffer. Whatever you think happened, he never knew what was coming. Sophia insisted on that, said we owed him that much." But that wasn't true. The real story would come out later. The partial confession was explosive, confirming not only Tyler's death, but Blake's participation in the murder and Sophia's role as the primary architect of the conspiracy. Walsh immediately contacted Foster, relaying Blake's statement and requesting additional investigative resources. The searches of both residences yielded a treasure trove of physical evidence that supported the digital proof investigators had already assembled. Sophia's home office contained detailed planning documents, including handwritten notes outlining the timeline of Tyler's murder and strategies for avoiding detection. One particularly damning notebook entry read, "Be worried about emotional attachment to T. Reminded him T never appreciated our sacrifice. This is survival, not sentiment." Blake's loft revealed evidence of extensive surveillance equipment, including cameras and tracking devices identical to those Tyler had discovered on his car. More significantly, investigators found Tyler's personal effects, his wallet, watch, and cell phone, hidden in a storage unit Blake had rented under a false name. The physical evidence supported everything the digital investigation had suggested. Sophia and Blake had spent months planning Tyler's murder, orchestrating the surveillance campaign that had driven him to paranoia while positioning themselves as his concerned supporters. But the real breakthrough came from Blake himself during his formal interrogation. Faced with overwhelming proof of his guilt and Sophia's ruthless manipulation, he began to unravel the conspiracy that had cost his best friend's life. Blake explained to Detective Foster during a recorded interview that she made it seem like the only solution. Sophia's businesses were failing, his real estate company was bankrupt. They were both facing financial ruin. Blake described how Sophia had first suggested the insurance scheme during one of their secret meetings, presenting Tyler's death as a business decision rather than murder. The plan had evolved gradually, with each step seeming reasonable until they committed themselves to a course that required killing the person they both claimed to love. "I never wanted to hurt Tyler," Blake continued. "But Sophia convinced me that Tyler would understand, that he'd want to help us if he knew how desperate we were." The rationalization was pathetic, revealing how thoroughly Blake had convinced himself that murdering his best friend was somehow justifiable. Sophia had preyed on his financial desperation and romantic attraction, manipulating him into participating in a conspiracy that would destroy everything he valued. Foster pressed for details about the actual murder, understanding that Blake's confession could provide the prosecution with crucial evidence about premeditation and method. Blake explained that it was supposed to look like a mugging. Sophia drugged his coffee before his run, something she got from her doctor for anxiety. He collapsed in the park, never even realized what was happening. The confession continued for 3 hours, Blake revealing every detail of the conspiracy from its inception to Tyler's burial at Blackwater Quarry. Sophia had orchestrated every element with calculated precision, from the fake surveillance campaign to the forged insurance documents to the elaborate performance she delivered for investigators. What shocked Foster most was Blake's description of Sophia's reaction to Tyler's death. Rather than grief or remorse, she displayed only relief and satisfaction, immediately beginning to plan their new life together funded by Tyler's insurance money. Blake recalled that she said they deserved happiness after everything they'd been through, that Tyler would want them to be together if he really loved them. The delusion was complete, a woman so consumed by greed and selfishness that she'd convinced herself that murdering her husband was an act of kindness. rather than betrayal.
Sophia, meanwhile, maintained her innocence despite overwhelming evidence, refusing to confess or provide any information about Tyler's location. Her attorney advised complete silence, understanding that anything Sophia said would only provide additional ammunition for prosecutors.
But Blake's detailed confession, combined with the digital evidence and physical proof, had already provided everything the prosecution needed to seek life imprisonment without possibility of parole for both conspirators.
The loyal friend's deception had finally crumbled, revealing the ugly truth behind the perfect crime that had never been perfect at all.
The Montgomery County Courthouse had become a media circus by the time Sophia Bennet and Blake Ramirez appeared for their arraignment hearing.
News vans lined the street, reporters fought for position, and curious onlookers gathered to catch a glimpse of the suburban couple whose perfect lives had concealed such devastating betrayal. Sophia's transformation was striking.
Gone was the perfectly styled boutique owner who charmed investigators with her grief-stricken performance. Prison uniforms had replaced designer clothes. Her platinum blonde hair now hung limp and messy. The confident manner had cracked to reveal something desperate and cornered beneath.
Blake looked equally diminished. The successful real estate investor now looked like what he truly was, a failed businessman who'd murdered his best friend for money. The confident charm that had convinced Detective Foster of his innocence felt like a memory from another lifetime.
But the most shocking revelation was yet to come.
As Prosecutor Daniel Cross prepared his opening statement, he received a call that would transform the entire case. A hiker had discovered human remains in a remote section of Blackwater Quarry, exactly where GPS coordinates had indicated Sophia and Blake's phones on the morning of Tyler's disappearance.
The body was badly decomposed after 3 weeks in the quarry's acidic water, but dental records confirmed what everyone already knew. Tyler Bennet had been found. More significantly, the coroner's preliminary examination revealed details that contradicted Blake's confession about a peaceful death. Tyler had suffered multiple trauma injuries, consistent with a violent struggle. Defensive wounds on his hands and arms suggested he'd fought desperately for his life. Detective Foster told the prosecution team as they reviewed the coroner's findings that Blake had lied about everything.
Tyler didn't die peacefully. He knew exactly what was happening to him. The discovery of Tyler's body provided crucial physical evidence, but it also revealed the depths of Blake's deception.
Even in confession, he tried to minimize the brutality of the crime, portraying himself as a reluctant participant in a mercy killing rather than the calculating murderer he truly was. Sophia's reaction to news of the body's discovery was equally revealing. Rather than grief or remorse, she immediately began blaming Blake for the violence, claiming she'd been manipulated and coerced into participating in a plan that had spiraled beyond her control.
She told her attorney during a jailhouse meeting that was secretly recorded by investigators that she never wanted Tyler to suffer. Blake convinced her it would be quick and painless. She had no idea he was going to do what he did.
The recorded conversation revealed Sophia's continued attempts at manipulation, even as her world collapsed around her. She portrayed herself as another victim of Blake's violence, a grieving widow who'd been deceived by her husband's best friend.
But prosecutors had evidence that told a very different story.
Sophia's computer search history, recovered by digital forensic specialists, painted a picture of meticulous planning and cold calculation.
Beginning in June, she'd researched methods of murder, strategies for disposing of bodies, and techniques for avoiding detection by law enforcement. Her searches included untraceable poisons, staged accident scenarios, and insurance investigation procedures. The browsing history revealed a woman who'd spent months planning her husband's death with the thoroughness of a professional assassin. Blake's confession, meanwhile, had provided investigators with additional leads that revealed the true scope of their conspiracy. The surveillance equipment found in his loft had been purchased over several months, suggesting extensive preparation rather than the spontaneous crime Sophia claimed.
More significantly, Blake revealed that Sophia had been drugging Tyler regularly, not just on the morning of his death. Sleep aids dissolved in his evening wine had made him groggy and disoriented, explaining his growing paranoia and confusion about the surveillance he was experiencing. The revelation painted Sophia not as a reluctant participant, but as the primary architect of a campaign of psychological torture that had preceded Tyler's murder by months.
As the evidence mounted, both defendants found themselves facing capital murder charges, with special circumstances that could result in life sentences without possibility of parole.
The premeditation, the financial motive, and the complete lack of remorse made their crimes far more serious than simple murder. Sophia's attorney, Thomas Mitchell, faced an impossible challenge.
The evidence against his client was overwhelming, documented with modern technology that left no room for alternative explanations. His only hope was to negotiate a plea bargain that would spare Sophia a life sentence in exchange for a full confession.
Blake's attorney, Rachel Martinez, pursued a different strategy, attempting to portray her client as a victim of Sophia's manipulation who'd been coerced into participating through a combination of romantic obsession and financial desperation.
Martinez argued during a pre-trial hearing that Sophia Bennet was a master manipulator. She preyed on Blake's loyalty to Tyler and his romantic feelings for her to convince him to participate in this conspiracy.
But prosecutors counted that Blake's own actions revealed him to be an equal partner in the conspiracy, someone who'd benefited financially from Tyler's death and shown no remorse until court. The case that had begun with a missing person report had evolved into one of the most complex murder investigations in the county's history, revealing layers of deception that had taken months to unravel.
As jury selection began, both Sophia and Blake faced the possibility of spending the rest of their lives in prison for the calculated murder of a man who trusted them completely. The perfect crime had become a perfect nightmare, destroying not only Tyler's life, but the lives of everyone who'd participated in his betrayal.
The trial of Sophia Bennet and Blake Ramirez was swift and decisive. Faced with overwhelming digital evidence, both defendants were convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud. The jury took 2 days to decide after a thorough trial.
Prosecutor Daniel Cross had presented a devastating case built entirely on technology. Cell phone GPS data, banking records, and digital forensics created a timeline so precise that defense attorneys could only argue about degrees of guilt rather than innocence.
Cross told the jury that these defendants thought they'd committed the perfect crime. Instead, they documented their own conspiracy through the very devices they carried every day. Sophia's attempt to testify in her own defense backfired badly. Blake chose not to testify, understanding that his earlier confession had already sealed their fate. Judge Michael Reynolds sentenced Sophia to life in prison without possibility of parole. Blake received 55 years with eligibility for parole after 30 years. Judge Reynolds said during sentencing that this case represented the ultimate betrayal of trust.
Tyler Bennet loved and trusted both of them completely. They repaid that trust with calculated murder, motivated by pure greed. As the sentences were read, Sophia collapsed at the defense table while Blake simply nodded, having accepted his fate months earlier.
The case immediately became a landmark in digital forensics, studied by law enforcement agencies as proof that modern technology had made perfect crimes virtually impossible. Detective Rachel Foster, promoted to captain following the successful investigation, often reflected on how Tyler's own smartphone had become his most effective witness. Foster observed that Tyler carried the instruments of justice in his pocket. Every GPS coordinate, every phone call, every digital footprint created evidence that ultimately convicted his killers. The Maserati that had symbolized Blake's greed was auctioned, its proceeds going to Tyler's estate. Sophia's boutique empire crumbled under bankruptcy proceedings. The Willowbrook Heights house where Tyler had lived his final days was sold, the new owners unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Tyler's parents established a foundation in his memory, using advanced technology to help solve missing person cases. In death, their son had demonstrated that justice could still prevail, even when the killers were the people victims trusted most. The case served as a stark reminder that in our connected world, our phones and computers record everything we do. For the guilty, this reality created an inescapable net of accountability. For the innocent, it offered hope that justice would always find a way. Technology had given Tyler a voice from beyond the grave, and that voice had spoken clearly enough to convict his killers and ensure they would never escape the consequences of their ultimate betrayal.